And the whole time I was speaking out in this park, there were 20 pro-war, pro-Ukrainian protesters who were screaming obscenities at me. And so I had to like shout in order to be heard.
Now I'm going to be speaking with Dmitry Lascaris, who's he was a former Green Party leadership candidate, and he has a tour right now across Canada speaking about Russia. And many people, there's a lot of efforts to stop him from doing this, to stop him from speaking to people. And I want to get his point of view and hear why it is he's being attacked like this. So please welcome Dmitry Lascaris. Hello.
Hey, Lee, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. And let me begin by saying I've never had the opportunity to say this to you. I first learned of you many years ago, and much appreciated your insightful, funny as hell, and unapologetic journalism and commentary. Watching you was both cathartic and entertaining at the same time. So it's a pleasure to be here and finally have a chance to speak with you face to face.
I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Yeah, you and I are in a similar situation right now. But you're on a current tour. Most of my cancellation happened a year ago, although the suppression continues. But you know, and obviously it's not just you. You're part of a grand tradition of those who are anti-war and want peace in the world being shut down and being suppressed and persecuted. But explain what it is you're doing with your tour and how it is that they're trying to stop it.
So I should just say, as sort of background to this this experience, that I've had to deal with something like this before. I was in the context of my Green Party activities, I brought forward a resolution calling for the party to support BDS because, you know, those of us who actually think Palestinians are human beings are alarmed and appalled by what's being done to them. And
most
so I had
everybody
to put
knows,
up
but
with a good
BDS is
deal of
boycott,
attacks.
divest, and sanction those companies that are supporting the apartheid state.
Thank you. And I thought that I'd never experienced anything that bad again. Now, this is way worse, Lee, like what I've had to put up with on this tour. Basically, what happened was in February of last year when Russia sent its forces into Ukraine. And, you know, as I try to explain at every opportunity, this war actually began in 2014, not last year. But definitely Russia escalated when it sent its troops in. I immediately came to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, that this is an existential threat to humanity. This war is extremely dangerous, and our governments in the West have a tremendous amount of responsibility for this mess, and it's spiraling out of control. So I started speaking out about this war and against the escalation of it. And then I decided that, you know, when this year came along, I should actually try to go to Russia and speak to people. Putin, there's certainly, you know, millions of Russians you can find in that category, but there are a lot more who actually support their government. And I wanted to hear from them because we aren't hearing from them. So I went there for a month, had an extraordinarily enlightening experience in Moscow and in Crimea. And then I came back, and immediately upon my return, I was approached by peace groups across the country and asked to do a speaking tour. And I accepted their proposal, and dozens of people around the country, literally from the east to the west coast, came together. I've actually just completed the tour. I spoke in 11 cities. In 4 cities, we were canceled out of the 11. And in one city, we were canceled twice, in Winnipeg, one of Canada's largest cities, within a 24-hour period. Yeah, we had one, they canceled, we got another one, they canceled. And then finally, at the 11th hour, we found a third one. And we actually managed to hold the event, you know, and had a really good turnout. So I got canceled once when I did a cross-country speaking tour about the BDS movement back in 2016. And we overcame that. This is wild. And the thing that I've discovered in the course of doing my research into this, you know, online and gathering documents, messages that were received by these venues, by people trying to cancel us, is that there seem to be some core players in this whole effort to shut us down. And all of them have connections to the military-industrial complex. They are either funded by or partners with, organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy, the so-called Defense Ministry of Canada, the U.S. State Department, and I believe there's a significant degree of orchestration going on here, because bottom line is the Anglo-American empire's era of global hegemony is at risk. It's ending, and the stakes couldn't be higher for them, and they're going to do everything possible to shut down dissent. And I think we've seen that firsthand on this tour. It's awesome to behold.
Yeah, and it certainly is not paranoid or far-fetched to believe that this could be a coordinated effort, because we have seen the evidence of coordinated efforts similar to this throughout the past many decades, but even just recently, the coordinated efforts that we now know with the Twitter files to suppress and censor and delete those questioning the mainstream narrative, especially the mainstream pro-war narrative. So the idea that they would, and there was a coordinated effort against me, a comedian. Within the span of like 1 or 2 months, I had a New York Times attack piece and an NPR attack piece done against me, basically just to make sure that when people Googled me, it was the first stuff that came up. And since then, they haven't been interested in me. It was clearly some sort of coordination to like have that done in a short period of time. But yeah, so the pressure, you're saying the pressure on these venues or organizations has been enough for them to just pull the plug on your events?
To the credit of most of the organizations, they stood their ground. Some did so on the basis of principle. Some, I think, did it because they were worried about a constitutional challenge. So, for example, the Toronto Public Library, which is government funded, had they canceled us, I could have potentially brought a claim against them under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is our equivalent of the Bill of Rights. And it also protects freedom of expression. But I think also it wasn't just about legal liability they were worried about there. I think there was some sympathy for the fact that we deserve to be heard. So again, most of the venues stood their ground, but I'd never seen this many venues. And it was, we were canceled on 2 university campuses, okay? St. Mary's University in Halifax and the Canadian Mennonite University in I believe it was Winnipeg. We were canceled at, charitable organizations. We were canceled at a private business whose owner is a friend of mine in my own city where I live, Montreal. And they were so, he actually said to me 3 hours before the cancellation, I gave you my word, I'm going to keep my word. And then an hour and a half later, he had to go back on his word because they were and I don't fault him for it. They were in the process of destroying his business. It was unbelievable what they were doing to him.
Wow.
There was a camera crew was going to come down and film people going in. There were going to be people standing outside his business protesting that he was giving a platform to a so-called Kremlin agent. They started giving him 1-star ratings all over, Google and other online platforms. And he had carefully built up a wonderful relationship with his clients over many years. He was just watching it destroyed before his very eyes. And so he finally said, look, man, they're going to kill my business. And so at that point, we had to take it out into a park 2 blocks away. And we conducted it outside. And the whole time I was speaking out in this park, there were 20 pro-war, pro-Ukrainian protesters who were screaming obscenities at me. And so I had to shout in order to be heard. As I said, I've never seen anything like it. And I think it's a really troubling, disturbing commentary on the deterioration of free expression in our societies. This is happening all over the West. We're running around lecturing other governments and countries about freedom of expression. We're setting a horrible example for the world.
But, to play devil's advocate, there's got to be something wrong with you psychologically that you don't want to see children murdered. I don't really understand why you would take that stance. But can you explain some of what you say on this tour that they're finding so offensive? What is it you found in your trip to Russia?
Well, the first thing I found in my trip to Russia is something I more or less concluded, but was a conviction that was strengthened by talking to people, is that Russia has some legitimate complaints. They have legitimate complaints. One complaint is they were assured that NATO wasn't going to expand eastward, and it did repeatedly. Another complaint is that there is a serious problem with neo-Nazism in Ukraine. And in fact, we could go on and on for hours about all the Nazi insignia that, the far-right militias are using in Ukraine. I talk about one fact, and that is the parliament of Ukraine adopted a national holiday for Stepan Bandera, who was, an anti-Semitic, mass-murdering, genocidal Nazi collaborator. And then they made it a criminal offense to deny the heroism of people like Stepan Bandera.
And even the New York Times, just the other day, a couple weeks ago, the New York Times, trying to defend it, but still they were admitting that there are swastikas and all kinds of Nazi, signs and symbols all over, symbology all over the Ukrainian troops. And in this New York Times article, they're saying, oh, but it's not a big deal, and they don't really understand what it means or something like that. I mean, but within it, they're admitting, oh, yeah, there's swastikas all over helmets and jackets.
Yeah. But, they're bastards, but there are bastards. To quote, I think it was President Truman, but at the end of the day, the thing that really drives them crazy, and I just highlighted a couple of complaints that I think are fair, they're legitimate and need to be addressed, that the Russians have. But the thing that really drives them crazy, that sends them into a frenzy, is when you say that the sensible and humane thing to do is to sit down at the table and negotiate a peace deal, and you can't do a peace deal without mutual compromise. You have to make compromises to the other side. They too would have to make compromises. But if we take a zero compromise approach and say that Russia effectively has to capitulate completely, there'll be no peace. And it's not a negotiation, that's a delusion. And it'll end in the destruction of Ukraine and possibly nuclear war. And that just drives them nuts. And I can't understand why.
Right. I mean, every one of these conflicts has ended at the peace table at some point. It's just a matter of when. And we know that the U.S. and Western allies don't want to allow that to happen, don't want there to be peace. Absolutely.
They want war because that's their objective, is to kill as many Russians as possible.
I want to show some of the style of attack pieces against you. It says you went to Moscow to whitewash the war. Is that your goal? Yeah. Just whitewashing war?
Well, I'd like to think that the goal of our tour is actually to stop the killing. Not to whitewash anything. And this guy, this dude, Adam Zivo, you're showing there, he's a columnist for a newspaper, the flagship newspaper of Canada's largest newspaper publisher, which is Post Media. And your viewers may be interested to know that Post Media is controlled by a pro-Trump hedge fund based in Connecticut. This is Canada's largest newspaper. And this article appeared on the front page of their flagship newspaper on a Monday morning. And as a condition of my doing the interview, because I've been dealing with this newspaper for years, they've been dragging my name through the mud for years. Mm-hmm. I told Zivo that I would not do the interview unless he agreed to have me record the entire conversation and then publish it on my website. And I did that. And I urge people, if they're interested in seeing the discrepancy between what's reported in these newspapers and what is actually said between the journalist and the interviewee, they should listen to the recording after they read the article.
Yeah, I had something similar when NPR wanted to do the piece on me, and they kept asking me for an interview, and I said, absolutely, if we can do it live, because I knew that they would, they're a radio station, not print, so I knew that they would just take whatever little half a sentence they could find to support their garbage. And so they kept refusing. They said, oh, no, we don't often do live interviews. And so they did the attack piece without an interview with me. And the following week, they talked to Karl Rove live.
So the sane guy, they won't talk to live, and the lunatic gets a full hearing. I mean, what more do you need to say? And this is the state broadcaster of the United States you're talking about.
Yeah, that many people view as so aggressively left-wing when it's not. It's neoliberal, pro-war garbage. But so talk a little about Canada, though, because I have plenty of viewers in Canada, but I have a lot of viewers in the U.S. who probably don't quite know that Canada is supporting this proxy war or what your average Canadian might believe.
Yeah, so Canada is it's in it up to its neck, this war. The Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who's trotted out and paraded like some kind of progressive superstar on the world stage, is in fact a warmonger. And not only is he a warmonger, he is in fact a tool, a vassal of the United States government, as are effectively all leaders in the West nowadays, to varying degrees. And ultimately, he's just going to do whatever the neocons in Washington tell him to do. We also have in this country a very large Ukrainian expat community, some of whose members are very peace-oriented, very progressive, and I'm honored to know them and work with them. But a lot of them come from the right and the far right of the Ukrainian political spectrum, and I think Trudeau, to some degree, is trying to curry favor with that constituency. It's a sizable one. And at the end of the day, we're also just the mere fact that we're members of NATO. Like I said, I gave a speech in front of the U.S. consulate on Sunday in which I said that, basically NATO is the mafia and the godfather is the U.S. government, and what they're running is a protection racket. And if you become a member of NATO, what's going to happen is first of all, you're going to see huge amounts of money constantly siphoned off from the public treasury to enrich arms manufacturers, most of whom are in the United States. And the other thing you're going to do is lose sovereignty over your foreign policy. Basically, the U.S. government is going to tell you what your foreign policy is. That's exactly what's happened to Canada. So people out there who have this image of Justin Trudeau as some kind of a beacon of progressivism, hope for the future. For the truth could not be further apart from that, the image that we're given of him. And I hope that people outside Canada dispense with this notion that somehow, we're good, we're peaceful, we just want to get along. That's not what this country's about, not at the leadership level. There are a lot of Canadians in the streets who feel that way, but at the leadership level, we are completely, paid for by the U.S. government.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think that a lot of people in the U.S. think that Canada is this peaceful neighbor, but really, Canada just signs on to all the wars the U.S. Gets involved in. Last question: what's next for you? The tour continues, I take it, and do you have any aspirations for further political office, or where do you see yourself?
I had the opportunity to run again for the Green Party of Canada leadership last year because the candidate, I came a close second. The candidate who defeated me lasted a year in the position. But frankly, Lee, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I learned in that experience that politics is a cesspool. And I just, I didn't want to plunge back in. What I would like to do, and I hope to have to be able to make a real contribution to it, is work on the campaign of Dr. Cornel West. And I've been speaking to people associated with this campaign team. I think he's a fantastic candidate. Cornel West is the real deal. And everybody outside of the United States needs to understand, if they don't already get this, what happens in U.S. politics affects us all because of the power, economically speaking and militarily speaking, of the United States government. So if there are ways in which you, as a non-citizen of the United States, can support a candidate like Cornel West, you have any time to give at all, I think you should do that, because if that man can gain traction politically in the United States, that'll be a wonderful thing for the whole world.
I am a big Cornel fan. I've done some events with him, and I think he's brilliant. However, I do have to say, and I'm wondering, I want to get your take on this real quick. I am the campaign manager for a candidate. It's a rock I found in my front yard for president. And if Cornel drops out or agrees to run as VP, would you support the yard rock? Because it would do far less damage.
Any of the candidates other than Cornel wouldn't hold a candle to the boulder together. So I'd rather support that rock than Trump or Biden or anybody, Kamala Harris, whoever it may be. Thank you very much for creating that opportunity for those of us who are politically disenfranchised, Lee.
All right, we heard it here first. If Cornel ends up dropping out, we have Dimitri on Team Rock. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really hope your tour keeps going great. The website is peaceandjusticenetwork.ca. And I guess that's where people can also get tickets and find out about events, correct?
Well, we just finished the tour, but you can go and check out the website. You'll find, videos and so forth of what we managed to accomplish despite all the heat we got. Thanks
Okay,
very
yeah,
much.
and I saw someone posting that there is video of your talks online, so people can watch it there. So,
yeah,
cool. Thank you so much.
great talking to you. See you later.
Good talking to you.